Today's topic of conversation is, who will replace Kimi Raikkonen at Ferrari? Raikkonen has now been with the prancing horse for 5 straight seasons. Since joining back in 2014, he's had 0 wins, his last coming in 2013 with the Lotus F1 team in the first race of the season. Last season, Kimi picked up his first pole position since France 2008 at the Monaco Grand Prix, but would go on to be bested by his teammate Sebastian Vettel and finish in P2. Testing for the 2018 F1 season is currently underway, and I've decided today to ask this question: who will replace Raikkonen at Ferrari? As I believe it's a topic now which is finally worth considering, as it finally looks like this could be Raikkonen's last season with Ferrari and the time he retires from the sport for good. The first potential candidate on our list will start his F1 career with the Sauber F1 team this season in 2018. He'll be alongside Marcus Ericsson, and his name, you've probably heard it by now, is Charles Leclerc. The Ferrari Young Academy driver won the Formula 2 Championship in his rookie season at just the age of 19, winning 7 races, 10 podiums and 8 pole positions. Charles is one of Formula 1's 2 rookies this season alongside Sergei Sorokin, and is poised to be Ferrari's chosen one. The future of Ferrari is pretty much on his shoulders. He's been in their Young Driver Academy now since what is believed to be 2010, and he is a world-class talent. Like I mentioned, winning the Formula 2 Championship in his first season, showing complete dominance. And with this test with Alfa Sauber, he's got to prove himself, because if he does well this season, he could easily end up in Ferrari for the 2019 season. He's regarded by many as Sauber's saviour and looks to be the most attractive option for Ferrari, as he is part of their young driver programme and is only 20 years old, making him the same age as Max Verstappen and only 1 year older than Lance Stroll. The issue with Charles Leclerc is that he's had no experience in Formula 1 so far, so really we can only estimate on what he's going to do this season, but by many people's predictions, everyone believes he's going to do great things this year for Alfa Sauber, and it looks very promising that he'll be in a Ferrari seat at some point in his career, and it looks very promising that'll be in either 2019 or 2020. The next 2 candidates were both born and bred through the Red Bull Young Driver programme, and are both current teammates at Red Bull, Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen. Starting with the Aussie, the Honey Badger himself, Daniel Ricciardo. He's now been at Red Bull since 2014 after the departure of Mark Webber after he retired. And he's been their number 1 ever since 2015 after Sebastian Vettel left the team for Ferrari. However, since the emergence of his young teammate Max Verstappen, Ricciardo's seat at Red Bull has been under threat. There's no doubt about that at all. With it now appearing for the 2018 season, Red Bull will be putting all their effort into developing Max Verstappen and putting Ricciardo on somewhat of what you could call the sidelines. And in turn, this has led to a lot of speculation about Ricciardo leaving Red Bull as his contract ends at the end of this current season in 2018. So where will he go? Well, one option is definitely Ferrari. The Australian has 5 wins, 27 podiums, 1 pole position, that was in Monaco, and is at the ripe age of 28, so in the prime of his F1 career. But would it be too soon for Red Bull to let him go? Well, Red Bull have the young Pierre Gasly and Brendan Hartley in Toro Rosso, but none of them are quite ready enough, I would say, for the Red Bull seat. However, they also have Carlos Sainz under contract, and so I'm sure Red Bull would have no issue letting Ricciardo go to allow Sainz to come into their number 1 team. So realistically, this gives Ricciardo 3 options. 1 is Ferrari, 1 is Renault, and 1 is Mercedes. The most likely of the 3, I believe, is Mercedes. I think Ricciardo would fit in best alongside Lewis Hamilton, and I think he would fit in best with that Mercedes work environment in the UK, where it's a bit less pressure on his shoulders. Ferrari, as I said, is also a huge option for Ricciardo. However, Ferrari famously like to have a number 1 driver and a clear number 2 driver. And I believe if Ricciardo would go to Ferrari, as we saw in 2014 when he was against Sebastian Vettel, Ricciardo is a great match for Vettel. And I do not think for 1 second that Ferrari would be willing to put their star driver up against such a competitive teammate like Ricciardo would be. Red Bull's second driver, Max Verstappen, is arguably F1's hottest prospect. The young Dutch has now won 3 Grand Prix, 2 in his last season and 1 in his first race for Red Bull. He is a sublime talent in the world of Formula 1, and that's definitely not going to be under question in this video. But for me, would he fit in with Ferrari? Well, as I mentioned with Daniel Ricciardo, Red Bull are really trying to carve out their space there for Verstappen, to make Verstappen their unsung hero, their clear number 1 driver, and I don't think they're going to let him go anywhere, especially to such a big rival as Ferrari. But the reason Verstappen is on this list is if Red Bull do not have an increase in performance, if Red Bull don't start fighting for that World Championship, then Verstappen won't want to stay. No matter how much resources Red Bull put into him, Verstappen is the sort of character where if he's not happy, he'll make everyone known. He's very much the next Sebastian Vettel and could easily have moved to Ferrari in years down the line. However, for that move to happen, that must mean, in the meantime, Ferrari will have to find another replacement for Kimi Raikkonen. And so, although I think it's very possible Verstappen will end up at Ferrari at some point in his career, to replace Raikkonen for the 2019 season? No, I just don't see that happening whatsoever, unless they get in someone on a short-term contract and then get Verstappen for the long term. I highly doubt that we will be seeing Max Verstappen replacing Kimi Raikkonen for the 2019 or 2020 season. When Sergio Perez arrived on the Formula 1 scene at the Team Sauber, he was the most wanted man in the sport. During his second season with Sauber, he had an extremely memorable race in Malaysia, so close to winning with the Sauber team but just missing out to Fernando Alonso. In 2013 he got his big move he had been waiting for to McLaren, replacing Lewis Hamilton and potentially becoming their number 1 driver once Jenson Button was to retire. But things would not all fall in place at McLaren. After just 1 season he was out the door and he was sent to Force India, where in his career he's picked up no wins but 7 podiums at the age of 28. Perez is perhaps the one that got away for Ferrari. Being part of Ferrari's young driver programme throughout the late 2000s, Perez would not get his chance at Ferrari, as when he went to join the team it would be Fernando Alonso and Felipe Massa occupying the seats, which meant he had to go to Ferrari's arguably second team at the time, Sauber. He never ever got his chance in Formula 1, and even though he spent time with McLaren, he was never given a break. He's still at Force India now, where he's been a solid driver. He's always scored points, always scored podiums. Last year was a bit of a blip really in terms of his career. But now he's up against Esteban Ocon. It appears he's lost his cool. The fact that he's never had his big break and his new teammate Ocon, who's only in his first season in Formula 1, is challenging and beating him on occasion, it's made Perez an unpredictable driver. Maybe this is why McLaren didn't want him. We saw this season Perez have many issues with Ocon on track and off track, and maybe for McLaren he was not seen as a marketable figure. Maybe this is why Ferrari have never picked him up. But today's question is that, will Perez replace Raikkonen? Well, it's certainly possible, having those Ferrari ties, being a very consistent driver, and I believe a slightly worse driver, a slightly less polished driver than Sebastian Vettel, and so would fit the second driver bill perfectly. But the issue is, Perez is very unpredictable. He's a short-term option, and is it really what Ferrari are looking for? I don't think so. Like I say, I think Perez is a very talented driver, but I don't think he's that A-star standard that Ferrari are generally looking for. And I don't think he's a solid backup in terms of being 100% reliable that they need in a number 2 driver. As I said as well, there's not age on his side. Someone like Leclerc and Verstappen is a much more attractive option because Ferrari will be able to mould the driver rather than be given a driver who's already been moulded into one of Formula 1's best. So will Perez get the seat? I doubt it. The only reason he would be, if I mentioned earlier, Perez was to get a short-term contract with then Ferrari to then a couple of seasons down the line to then hire a Leclerc or a Verstappen. So will this happen? It's possible, but it won't be a long-term option. And in terms of really replacing Kimi Raikkonen as a long-term Ferrari driver, Perez will not be that. And so I do not think Kimi Raikkonen will be replaced by Sergio Perez. Perhaps one of the most likely people to replace Raikkonen at Ferrari is this man, Romain Grosjean. Many people saw his move to Haas in 2016 as a deliberate attempt to put his foot in the door at Ferrari, and I think it's worked, and I definitely think he's one of the leading contenders for this seat. Perhaps one of the most underrated drivers on the grid, Romain Grosjean has had a total of 10 podiums in his career, including one for Lotus in the dogged 2015 car in Spa against all of the odds that weekend. Romain is 31 years old and for me fits the Ferrari bill perfectly. He will be a perfect number 2 driver to Sebastian, but quick enough to win races if he's needed, as well as secure vital points for the Constructors' Championship. Grosjean has been the outright number 1 at Haas for the past 2 seasons, outscoring both teammates, and he really is crucially underrated throughout all the drivers. Like I say, you think back to 2012, he really did put up a good fight against Raikkonen in his early stages of his career. The issue with Grosjean is not his age, but perhaps his reputation in the early parts of his career. So he started off his first full season in Formula 1 was 2012 with the Lotus team, which came with plenty podiums in multiple second places. However, he did have a reputation of quite a dangerous driver. Obviously, I can imagine you all remember that Spa 2012 incident where Grosjean and Hamilton made contact before turn 1, and consequently Alonso, Maldonado and Kobayashi were cleaned up in the wreckage. Grosjean was given a 1 race ban for Monza, but ever since then, his act has cleaned right up, apart from a few minor incidents here and there. But his driving standard since that ban has gone up another level, in my opinion. And like I mentioned earlier, that drive in 2015 Spa was unbelievable and really one of the standout drives to me in the hybrid era. Grosjean would be a perfect fit for Ferrari, being able to easily slot into that second place position in the team, and then when he eventually retires, which I imagine Ferrari would be able to at least get 4 seasons out of him, maybe even 5 considering how old Raikkonen is, and then when Grosjean eventually retires, Sebastian will then be the right age to take that number 2 seat, and a younger driver like Leclerc or Verstappen could easily fill that number 1 seat. And that's why I think Grosjean is a real candidate for this seat. Our penultimate candidate is 3 times race winner Valtteri Bottas. The Finn joined Mercedes last season on a 1-year contract, which was extended due to his 3 race wins in Austria, Russia and Abu Dhabi. Having displayed his talent at Williams, especially during the hybrid era, Valtteri earned his move to Mercedes last season, and critics weren't overly impressed. It was a solid first year at Mercedes with 3 wins, and he now has a total of 22 podiums in his career, collecting 4 pole positions with the Silver Arrows along the way. But why have I put him on this list? Well, it looks like at the end of this season, Daniel Ricciardo could be making the switch to Mercedes, unless Valtteri can pull off something stunning. Mercedes are not known for a single 1-2 driver policy that Ferrari are known for, and if Valtteri does not step it up, he will not be remaining at this team. So where can he go? He isn't one of the worst drivers on the grid, he isn't one of the best. I'd say he's a B+ driver, very similar to Sergio Perez actually, and I think on his day, Valtteri can be outstanding. But he just wasn't consistent enough this season, and I think if he's to remain at Mercedes in this coming season in 2018, he's going to have to be right up there with Lewis Hamilton every single race, or else he'll lose out on that seat to drivers like Ricciardo. So why do I think he'll fit in at Ferrari? Well, as mentioned, Ferrari have a strict 1-2 policy. You're either number 1 or number 2. Vettel is number 1, they need a number 2. It's pretty straightforward as that. And Valtteri is definitely a very similar character to Rikknen, and I imagine is someone that Sebastian gets along very well with due to this. Bottas is a consistent point scorer, perhaps not a consistent race winner, but that's all Ferrari need. They need someone who can back up Sebastian, get points for those Constructors' Championships like he did at Mercedes this season, and generally just to cause as little drama as possible, which is something Bottas definitely would do. He's only 28 years old, the same age as Ricciardo and Perez, and I definitely believe he's a more attractive option than both of those drivers. Ricciardo being that he'll be too quick and maybe cause a bit of upset within the team, especially with Sebastian, and Perez with his perhaps rugged temperament, which I don't think would fit the Ferrari way. I really don't. So will Bottas get the move? Well, I think it will all depend, like I say, on if he stays at Mercedes, and will all depend if he does well this season. I think realistically, if you look at the driver market, Ricciardo will be leaving Red Bull, which means he will most likely go to Mercedes, leaving Sainz to go to Red Bull, and Bottas slotting into that Renault role. And I think Renault would definitely be a more preferable option to Bottas, who could become that number 1 once Hülkenberg retires. And Ferrari, for them, I definitely think we've mentioned other drivers in that list would be a better fit to their team, mainly because if Bottas goes to Ferrari, then that will mean there's at least 4 or 5 seasons there where Leclerc won't be in Ferrari, and he'll be tempted to go to other teams and off the Ferrari books. And at the end of the day, Leclerc is who they want in the end, to replace Sebastian as that number 1, and I don't think that Bottas will be moving to Ferrari anytime soon. Our final candidate to replace Rikknen at Ferrari is 19-year-old Canadian Lance Stroll. I can imagine that some of you are quite shocked that I've put Stroll on this list, however I do think he's in with a shot. There is no denying whatsoever that Stroll maybe had one of the most topsy-turvy rookie seasons in Formula 1 perhaps ever. Picking up that amazing 3rd place in Baku and that front row start in Monza, not too bad for someone just 18 years of age and in their first season of Formula 1 under such limelight in a Williams car. And I also believe some people do not appreciate that Stroll had some very strong races in a very dodgy car. You look at the likes of Austria, where they started on the back row and he fought back up into the points. You even look at Abu Dhabi in that final race of the season, fighting with Romain Grosjean, some of the best racecraft against such amazing talent with Romain Grosjean. And I really think Stroll is another one of those drivers who is actually underrated. Though Stroll can't go without some criticism, outscored by Felipe Massa, his ageing teammate, who was not wanted by Ferrari and now isn't wanted by Williams. Is Stroll really that quick? Well, he was part of the Ferrari Young Driver Academy and has shown his speed in Formula 1, I believe, inconsistently. I definitely think he has it on some days, but not others. So you might be thinking, why do I think Ferrari would pick him up? Well, this season he'll be leading a team in only his second season in the sport. However, he's still seen as many as a paid driver. And I think people do forget that drivers like Sergio Perez, Max Verstappen and even Lewis Hamilton are also paid drivers. Although, to be fair to Perez and Hamilton, they have also proved their worth in the sport. Now Stroll isn't going anywhere. If he doesn't move to Ferrari, he'll stay at Williams. There's no doubt about that. Williams are already in a driver crisis because they can't decide which unproven driver they want in their car out of Robert Kubica and Sergei Sorokin. Kubica, of course, has come back from this incredible injury. It's an amazing story that he's been able to find his way back into Formula 1, but he's pretty much got to start from square one. He's not proven anymore. We don't know if he's got the same speed. His physical limitations seem like they could be an issue. And Sorokin has been okay in Formula 2, but nothing special. And so Stroll, he doesn't have a high benchmark, but he's got to outscore either of these guys, because Kubica, I do believe, could get a chance this season to have a full race weekend. But my key reasoning behind putting Stroll on this list is that yes, he's a young driver for the Ferrari Academy, or at least he used to be, but if Leclerc in Formula 1, it doesn't go well, he could have a season like Romain Grosjean's first season in Formula 1, where he gets a race ban, and Ferrari could look at other opportunities for young drivers. And I definitely think Stroll could be one of those drivers if he finds the consistency and if he's quick enough. Because he seems like a guy who really just wants to crack on. He also seems like a guy who's not going to cause much issue in terms of pushing Sebastian for that number 1 seat. And there could be a natural switch there in terms of Vettel slowly aging and moving to that number 2 seat and Stroll taking that number 1 seat. But again, this will only happen if Leclerc is not quick enough and someone who I've not yet mentioned in this video, Antonio Giovinazzi, isn't quick enough. And so, to round this off, Stroll, will he get the seat? Will he replace Raikkonen? It's very unlikely, but highly possible if Leclerc just isn't good enough. So who will replace Kimi Raikkonen at Ferrari? Will it be this season? If I'm being brutally honest, I think Ferrari will actually keep Raikkonen for the 2019 season. And I think really, when we're looking at this question, we need to be considering who will Ferrari want in their team for the 2020 season. And I think when we're considering this, there's only one man it can be, and that's Charles Leclerc. The reason I believe this is that Leclerc will now have 2 seasons to prove himself in Formula 1, both with Sauber, Ferrari's B team, and by the time we actually reach the 2020 season, Sebastian Vettel, I feel, will be more than happy to slowly start to give up that number 1 seat. He'll want to be at Ferrari, I believe, now for the rest of his career, unless he really becomes a downhill number 2, but I don't think he'll ever let that happen. I think he'll retire before then. But I think by the time we reach 2020, Sebastian will be happy to sort of move on his talents, let someone else have a go at being the number 1 driver at Ferrari. And I think Leclerc, judging by what he's done in Formula 2, what it looks like he's going to be able to do this season, I think will be a perfect fit for Ferrari. And I think then, once Vettel eventually retires, it'll be Leclerc, the number 1 driver, and Antonio Giovinazzi, the number 2 driver. However, if Raikkonen does not stay on for the 2019 season, I believe it will be Romain Grosjean who goes to the team on a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal, and then Leclerc will fill that seat afterwards anyway, which means who will replace Kimi Raikkonen? In the long term, Charles Leclerc. He will be Ferrari's next big name, Ferrari's next world champion. And that concludes my question: who will replace Kimi Raikkonen at Ferrari? If you're new around here, guys, this was a new style of video I've tried on my channel today. It's taken me a much longer period of time to edit, create, but I think it's a much higher standard than my usual videos, and this is the sort of standard now that maybe once a week I want to produce what I'm going to call a mini documentary almost about a question. And I am already working on a Will Formula E replace Formula 1 documentary as the next one, but this was almost a little trial for this sort of style of video to see if you guys think it works, what I need to improve. Just some feedback would be great if that's possible at all. Like I say, I really enjoyed doing this. This is my favourite thumbnail I've ever put on the channel as well. I think it's worked out really nice, and I just think the whole thing, for me, it's probably one of the best videos I've ever produced on YouTube on any of my channels. So really proud of how this has gone. If you are new around here, we generally do all sorts of Formula 1 news, Formula 2 news, and all the news around the world of motorsport. As you can see, I'm already changing my tone, so you can see this is a very, very different video than what we usually do. But guys, if you have enjoyed, like, subscribe, thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.